Welcome back to the deep dive. If 2025 felt like just a constant barrage of product announcements, unexpected new hardware, features you didn't even know you needed, like having full satellite connectivity on your wrist, you were definitely not alone.
Not at all.
According to the exhaustive analysis we've been digging into, 2025 was no question the busiest and most chaotic year ever for wearable sports tech.
It really was. It felt like a year defined by these huge technological leaps. I mean, big high-risk swings that really did change what a sports watch could even do.
But now we're into 2026.
And the industry is shifting dramatically. It's moving away from pure invention and more towards refinement. So our mission today is to take you straight into the most crucial forecast we could find. The really detailed January 2026 update from the 5K runner, put together by a race leader, and just distill the absolute core insights.
This is basically your shortcut to understanding this whole complex, shifting landscape of sports watches, bike computers, and especially how Garmin is tweaking its strategy to stay on top in this new cycle.
A cycle of technological maturity. That's the key phrase.
We've got this incredible source material. It's like our crystal ball for the year ahead. And the initial snapshot is so important. 2025 was hectic. You had these massive, groundbreaking innovations hitting the market. But 2026... it looks a lot calmer.
Calmer, yeah, but say far more strategic. The energy just shifts completely. It's no longer what amazing new tech can we invent.
Right.
It's more like, okay, where are the holes in our product line we need to plug with existing features? And also, how do we push the boundaries at the absolute high end, even if almost no one buys it? It's a year of consolidation, of iteration, and honestly just filling in the gaps left by the chaos of last year.
Which brings us right to the key question we want you, the listener, to keep in your mind through this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
What happens to innovation when the core technology starts to plateau?
And what becomes the new battleground for knowledge?
Exactly. We're going to unpack how Garmin plans to answer that. And it's not necessarily with revolutionary new hardware, but by just flooding the market with models. It almost feels like they're deliberately trying to overwhelm the competition, Polar, Sunto, Coros, as they're all desperately trying to catch up on the features Garmin released last year.
So let's set the stage. Let's establish that market context by looking at where we are technologically right now.
If 2025 was the year of the big leap, 2026 is the year we're all realizing those leaps have kind of hit a ceiling, a state of maturity.
Absolutely. And the perfect example of that is GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite System Technology.
And GPS,
Yeah.
and GPS and all its friends. We've hit a point where dual-frequency, multi-constellation GNSS chipsets, they're not a premium feature anymore. They're not just for the $1,000 Phoenix models.
It's just standard equipment now.
It's table stakes. This ability to talk to multiple satellite systems across 2 different frequency bands. You just have to have it to be a serious sports watch in 2026. And so within that new standard, the real difference is becoming who supplies the chip. According to our source, Garmin is using Synaptics chipsets, and the analysis suggests they're just better, superior to the older Sony tech that companies like Sunto have been relying on.
And that's more than just a small detail for the tech nerds. It's a real tactical advantage that translates directly to your experience as a user.
So why is Synaptics better? What does that mean for my run through downtown?
It comes down to performance when you're in a tough environment, like a dense city with tall buildings or a deep canyon. Out in the open, they're both great. But Synaptics chipsets, they tend to lock onto a signal faster, and they hold it more steadily when there's a lot of signal reflection or obstruction.
So fewer of those weird zigzags on my map track.
Exactly. And more consistent pace metrics when you're running through a city center. That small difference, when you add it up over dozens of hours of training data, it really matters.
And this is where Garmin tries to push things, even when the core tech is mature. They introduced 5 Hz GNSS recording.
Which sounds incredibly impressive, right? 5 times more frequent data recording than the standard 1 hertz once per second that we're all used to.
5 times the data. But there's a catch.
There's a big technical snag, and it's the constraint of the FIT data format. The current FIT file standard, which is basically the universal language for all our sports data, it just wasn't designed to handle that density of points from a consumer device. Not yet, anyway.
So the hardware can capture it, but the software ecosystem isn't ready for it.
Pretty much. Getting it reliably into your training log, having platforms like Strava or Training Peaks actually use it, that's going to require software updates across the board, maybe even an industry-wide change to the standard.
So for now, that 5 Hz recording is what? A niche feature.
Totally. A niche edge case application. Think about really dynamic short burst stuff. A track sprinter, maybe?
Huh?
Or a cyclist on a tight technical criterium course. For the average marathon runner, it's not really changing their post-run analysis right now, but it shows you where Garmin's head is at,
The innovation isn't in overall accuracy anymore.
which is already excellent.
It's in the sheer density and frequency of the data they're capturing.
Exactly. And that plateau effect, it's not just GPS. Optical heart rate tech, OHR, has hit the same wall. For the average person, it's good enough now. It's reasonably accurate.
But we've been hearing these promises for years about the next generation of sensors, the ones that can measure totally new things.
Novel physiological parameters, yeah. Things like non-invasive hydration or lactate thresholds or deeper metabolic markers. But the source is pretty clear. Even in 2026, that major sensor breakthrough is just not imminent. The core tech is mature. We're still waiting for what you might call the level 2 sensor array, which needs totally new ways of sensing.
And this flattening of the innovation curve, it goes beyond the hardware. It's in the metrics themselves. The core ideas, recovery scores, training load, readiness, those were pioneered years ago by companies like Polar and Aura.
That's right. The science is pretty established. So the new battleground isn't inventing a new metric. It's about presenting the existing data in a way that's clean, contextual, and actually actionable. It's an app race now.
It's a race to perfect the smartphone app experience. And Whoop is explicitly called out as the gold standard here. Their app is just incredibly clean, it gives you context, and it doesn't overwhelm you.
On the other hand, the source points to platforms like Polar's, suggesting they really need to invest in a major revamp of how they show you your data if they want to compete.
They do. The mass market customer wants clear, immediate answers, not a spreadsheet of physiological data they have to interpret themselves.
Okay, let's talk about screens, because this is where Garmin tried to leap ahead and had a huge, very public setback. The micro-LED disappointment.
This is such a crucial story from 2025, and it says so much about the risks of using bleeding-edge tech. The whole industry is moving to AMOLED screens. They're bright, colorful. People love them.
Right.
Garmin tried to innovate at the very top with the Fenix 8 Pro. They introduced microLED, which on paper was the dream technology. The brightness of AMOLED with the incredible energy efficiency of the old MIP displays.
And you have to give them credit for being the first to try and commercialize it. Huge credit. But here's the drama. Their supplier, a company called AUO, failed to deliver. They just couldn't make the screens with the required energy efficiency.
So instead of better battery life.
The Fenix 8 Pro got performance degradation. We were seeing reports from beta testers complaining the watch could barely last a full marathon, which is just, it's unacceptable for a $1,000 Fenix that's designed for multi-day endurance events.
Wow, so they took this massive technological swing and the supplier failure just completely undercut their main selling point on battery life.
It turned what should have been a triumph into a total liability. And the clear implication for 2026 is that we will not see any mainstream micro-LED models until that tech can reliably deliver on its promises. For now, the old MIP screen, paired with solar, is becoming a true niche technology. You'll probably only see it on super specialized watches like the upcoming Enduro 4.
Okay, so let's shift from the tech itself to the external forces that are shaping the market, because it's not just about products. There are these other factors that are going to make 2026 pretty tough for both consumers and companies, starting with pricing.
The era of low, stable pricing is definitely over. After a few years of things being relatively calm, the forecast confirms that pretty much everyone, Garmin, Coros, Sunto, they're all raising prices on their new models.
And for the challengers like Sunto and Coros, that feels like a really risky move. They used to be the value alternative to Garmin.
They did. They relied on lower-cost models to get market share and brand awareness. Now they're moving away from that. The source calls it a pseudo-premium brand pricing strategy. That low-cost volume game is over, and it pushes them into a direct fight with Garmin's ecosystem, which is uncomfortable for them.
And some of this isn't their fault, right? It's driven by bigger pressures.
Totally unavoidable. Tariffs, global supply chain issues. It all means that, especially for American consumers, costs are going up. Some companies are trying to soften the blow by raising prices more in other regions, but the overall cost to make and ship these things is just up globally.
And the talk of tariffs leads right into manufacturing.
Yeah.
Almost all of this tech is made in Asia, a lot of it in China. And now there's this big push to de-risk operations.
Which is a huge logistical nightmare, especially for smaller companies. Apple is, of course, leading the way. They moved a big chunk of their watch production from China to Vietnam, specifically for models going to the US to get around tariffs and geopolitical risk.
The scale of that move is just immense.
It is, and smaller companies like Koros and Sunto, who are working on much thinner margins, they're going to struggle to make those same moves. It leaves them really vulnerable to future trade problems.
Okay, let's pivot to what might be the single most important non-product factor for Garmin's future, and that's the European Union.
This is a fascinating one. It's the question of whether regulation can actually level the playing field against a tech giant like Apple.
So we know about the general stuff, right? The push for user-replaceable batteries, the standard USB-C charging. The Google Pixel Watch 4 even had user-changeable batteries back in 2025.
Right, and that's all good for us as consumers. Fewer proprietary cables to pack in your bag. But the really crucial element, the part that our source says is strategically significant to Garmin, is the EU's absolute determination to break Apple's grip on its walled garden, its ring-fenced smart features.
Apple is not happy about this.
Predictably, no. They're furious. But think about it. If the EU succeeds in forcing more interoperability, forcing Apple to open up access to core device features, it could completely change the game for Garmin.
How so?
It would let them build much more coherent swipe features that deeply integrate with an iPhone. Imagine seamless notification handling, real two-way messaging, maybe even access to iOS health data APIs that Apple currently locks down.
That's always been Garmin's weakness against the Apple Watch. It's a great sports watch, but it's not as smart.
Exactly. If regulators solve that problem for them, it completely changes the competitive dynamic. Garmin suddenly becomes a genuine, highly integrated alternative for the iPhone user who's also a serious athlete.
Okay, so we've got this market context, mature tech, rising costs, a big supplier failure with micro-LED, and this potential lifeline from the EU. So let's get into Garmin's 2026 product strategy, which, as you said earlier, is all about market saturation.
That's the core idea. Garmin's playbook for 2026 is basically two-pronged. First, find the tech gaps at the super high end and push bleeding edge, but proven features there.
And second,
Simultaneously swamp every single market segment below that with new variations and triple-down features from last year. Their goal is just absolute coverage. They want to make sure that if you, the consumer, are looking for a watch, the question in your head is which Garmin, not which brand.
let's start with those high-end pushes. Connectivity is a big one. Garmin is sticking with 4G LTE and pushing it onto more Pro models, even while Apple is moving to 5G RedCap.
This is a really calculated risk. For anyone who doesn't know, 5G RedCap is a lower power, lower bandwidth version of 5G made for devices like smartwatches. It's much better for battery life than old 4G LTE.
So why is Garmin sticking with 4G?
They're prioritizing reliability and coverage right now. 4G LTE is proven, it's established, and its coverage is massive. They seem to be delaying the switch to 5G RedCap, which is still rolling out until maybe 2027. They'd rather saturate the market with reliable current-gen connectivity in 2026.
We're also expecting a new MRQ series. That's their ultra-premium luxury line. And after the Fenix 8 Pro micro-LED mess, the big question is whether Garmin will double down on micro-LED with the MRQ.
It's the ultimate high-stakes gamble for them. If they go with the traditional AMOLED or MIP screen, they're basically admitting that micro-LED is shelved for now. It's admitting defeat.
But if they release a new MRQ with an improved micro-LED that actually works,
it would be a colossal statement. It would mean they found a new supplier, solved the problem, and that the tech is back on the roadmap for the Fenix 9. If they don't feature it in the MRQ, it's a strong signal that micro-LED is on ice until 2027 or later.
beyond the watches, for cyclists, we're expecting the start of the new Edge by 60 series, led by the Edge 1060, and niche updates like the Enduro 4 in the second half of the year.
But the really big move is Garmin targeting a whole new product category, a dedicated Whoop competitor. We've seen Polar and Amazfit get into this 24/7 wearable band market, but Garmin's entry would be really disruptive.
Because they have the data ecosystem.
They have the superior ecosystem and data structure. They are perfectly positioned to correlate deep physiological data from a simple band with all your training data. They're trying to capture the customer who wants all the wellness metrics without having to wear a big watch 24/7.
And finally, their satellite stance. It seems surprisingly measured for 2026. After the big push with the Fenix, the source suggests we're not going to see it rolled out to a bunch more mainstream watches this year.
Again, it speaks to that theme of consolidation. Satellite capability is complex and it's expensive. So rather than putting it on every new watch, they're shifting the focus to high-end handhelds. We might see onboard satellite tech added to those, offering an alternative to their dedicated inReach devices. It's a slow, deliberate expansion.
Okay, let's dive deep into the core watch lines, starting with the flagship, the Fenix. Historically, they've had a 12 to 18-month refresh, but the source says Garmin wants to get to annual cycle.
They're aggressively pushing for that, yeah, to keep pace with Apple and Samsung. And that points to a high probability of seeing the Fenix 9 in September 2026 or January 2027 at the very latest.
And the speculation for the Fenix 9 is that it has to have everything.
Everything. It has to incorporate all the lessons from 2025. So we'd expect 5G RedCap, full satellite capability, the crucial new Elevate 6 sensor, and hopefully a much improved micro LED screen option or a clever way to integrate with the iPhone thanks to that potential EU intervention.
The Forerunner strategy, though, is the opposite of innovation. It's all about gap filling. The current lineup is already huge. You've got the 55, the 165, the 265, and the high-end 570 and 970.
And in 2026, they're going to flesh out the lower and mid-range even more to make sure there are 0 price points left uncontested. So we're expecting new lower-end models like a Forerunner 170 and Forerunner 270. This is the definition of swamping the market.
What does that mean in terms of features? How do they segment a 170 from a 270 and both of those from the 265?
That's the key to the strategy. The FR170 will likely lose advanced mapping and music storage. It'll be a pure connected phone running watch. The FR270 will probably get music back, but it'll ditch advanced multi-sport profiles like triathlon. And it won't have things like a barometric altimeter. It's intentional omission. It's not a cheaper watch with all the features. It's a feature-reduced watch at a lower price.
And at the high end of the Forerunner line, we're seeing more size options, like a smaller 41mm Pro LTE version of the 970.
This is a direct response to customer demand. A lot of runners, especially women or those with smaller wrists, want all the top-tier metrics in connectivity, but not in a giant 47mm case. It's about maximizing market share by offering the exact combination people want.
Which leads to this proposed naming strategy shift for 2026-2027.
Right, to avoid getting into 4-digit model numbers, they might start incrementing by 5 instead of 10, so you'd get an FR75 series. But here's the really important part for consumers at the high end. The PRO suffix is expected to be standardized, and it will just mean 4G LTE capability. You won't need LTE in the name anymore.
So if it says Pro, it's connected.
If it says Pro, it's connected. It simplifies the lineup.
Okay, what about the Adventure line? The Instinct 3 has been really popular.
It's a huge seller for them. So 2026 is an iteration year. We'll see the usual surf and camo versions. But what's important is what it won't get: maps. The Instinct line will not get full-on device maps yet.
So that shows the trickle-down hierarchy. They're holding that feature back.
For now. The prediction is that maps will finally arrive on the Instinct line in 2027, probably starting with a more expensive Instinct Pro version first. And this is the main theme. 2026 is all about trickle-down. It's just efficiently recycling the high-end software and hardware from last year's Fenix and Pro models and cascading it down to the mid- and lower-end watches.
Let's shift gears to cycling. The Edge 1060 is the big highlight for 2026, and Garmin is really sticking with that odd vertical case shape.
They are. We're even seeing it on their eTrex handhelds. But Garmin's dominance in bike computers is it's indisputable. They have the market share, the compatibility, the ecosystem lock-in.
But the source struggles to identify the next big thing for bike computers.
It's a bit worrying for innovation, honestly. Beyond maybe adding NFC for payments, what else do you even add? They already do mapping, navigation, every sensor metric imaginable.
We've basically hit a feature wall.
Exactly. They're so far ahead, their tech is already so advanced that it's just incredibly hard for them to innovate further. And we'll get to this later, but it's now much, much easier for the challengers Wahoo Hammerhead to catch up than it is for Garmin to pull further ahead.
At the low end, the Edge 140 never showed up.
And it might be skipped entirely. We might see an Edge 150 only if Garmin decides that low-margin entry-level segment is still worth it. They might just push people toward the mid-range instead.
And for accessories, a refresh of the Varia radar taillights is expected.
Right, and maybe an improved Climb 2 and Kisikara Move 2 from Wahoo on the indoor side later in the year. The focus on accessories just suggests that the core bike computer itself is pretty close to technically perfect. The innovation has to happen around the edges now.
Okay, we've covered the products and the consolidation strategy. Now let's look at the next big hurdle, the next generation of sensors. If Elevate 5 gave us on-demand ECG back in 2023, what does the rumored Elevate 6 sensor need to do to really move the needle in 2026?
The clear, immediate feature everyone is chasing is blood pressure and hypertension trend sensing. This is the new holy grail for wellness devices because it tackles a massive public health issue.
But the source mentions an ominous silence around true FDA-approved medical-grade features here. Why is that so tricky?
It's the difference between a wellness trend and a medical diagnostic. To get FDA approval, the readings have to be reliably accurate for doctors to use, and that's incredibly hard to do with optical sensors on the wrist, which can vary wildly based on skin tone, movement, how tight you wear it.
But big tech is pushing ahead anyway.
Exactly. Whoop is offering some non-approved trend data. Apple and Samsung are already marketing hypertension trends. Garmin knows they have to respond. They can't get left behind in the core wellness space.
Let's look at their current sensor, Elevate Gen 5. It has on-demand ECG, but it's pretty limited.
Very limited. You have to stop what you're doing, sit still, hold the bezel. It's manual. And crucially, it lacks passive ECG. It only infers if you might have atrial fibrillation based on heart rate variability. It doesn't provide the true continuous passive detection that an Apple Watch can during rest.
So if they're building Elevate 6 for the Phoenix 9, the requirements are pretty clear.
They are. Number one, it needs reliable blood pressure trending data. Number two, it needs passive ECG to monitor you at rest. And then there's speculation about entirely new sensors like EMG, electromyography.
Okay, what is EMG and how would a watch even use that?
So electromyography measures the electrical activity in your muscles. In a watch, it wouldn't be measuring a big muscle contraction. It would be sensing these tiny electrical changes in your forearm muscles that are related to movement and fatigue.
What's the application for that?
The potential is groundbreaking. A deeper understanding of muscle recovery. Granular trapping of your form deteriorating on a long run. Maybe even giving you real-time feedback on your muscle activation. This would be true innovation in the face of that plateau we talked about. It's finding new biological data to measure.
The long-term quest is obviously for things like non-invasive glucose or lactate. Apple is supposedly working on a big new sensor package.
But here's the surprising thing. Garmin is usually seen as conservative, but they were the ones who snuck ahead with micro-LED even though it failed. And that suggests they're willing to invest heavily in next-gen sensors. It's totally possible they could pull off another surprise and get ahead on a new biomarker sensor too.
And the focus isn't just on what the watch can sense. It's about integrating that data. And the big trend for 2025 and 2026 is external blood panel data.
This is a huge consumer wellness trend. You pay for external lab tests that map 50 or 100 biomarkers, vitamins, minerals, lipids, all of it. Whoop started rolling this out in 2025, and it shows the trend is going mainstream.
The real power comes when you merge that lab data with what the watch is already collecting.
Exactly. When you can correlate your low vitamin D score from a blood panel with the poor sleep and low HRV your Garmin has been tracking for months, that creates a powerful, personalized health story. Garmin already has the data structure to do this. We should fully expect them to add blood panel integration soon.
And down the line, that leads to closer integration with actual medical records.
Right. Allowing doctors or insurers to access your long-term data, with your permission, of course. That's the ultimate goal of all this wellness tracking, turning passive data into proactive medical insight.
Let's circle back quickly to smart features. Garmin has always lagged a bit here, but they are trying to close the gap.
The addition of high-quality mics and speakers to their newer watches is all about being a more competent smartwatch. The main reason is for voice assistance and better call handling. The fact that you can also get audio cues during a run is a secondary benefit.
But they still have this massive drawback with their location sharing. It's really restrictive. It only works if your friend also has the Garmin Messenger app.
That's a critical interoperability failure. It's a huge barrier to use and a perfect example of where they suffer compared to the native integration on an Apple or Google Watch.
But you've mentioned that the regulatory environment could be the wild card here.
Absolutely. The EU could solve Garmin's interoperability problems for them almost overnight. If they succeed in forcing Apple to open up its smart features and APIs, Garmin could finally compete on a level playing field in the pure smartwatch space. That would be a transformation for them.
Okay, that brings us to the competition. With Garmin executing this saturation strategy, what are the specialist challengers, Sunto, Polar, Coros doing to survive?
The common strategy across all of them is just feature catch-up. They're all scrambling to add the mapping, the deeper physiology, the audio features that Garmin rolled out last year or the year before.
And here's the problem. They're also raising their prices, which puts them in a direct fight with Garmin, a fight they almost always lose. Why is that?
Because they're trying to copy Garmin instead of finding their own unique angle. Garmin's ecosystem, the Connect platform, the accessories, the decades of data, it's just vastly superior. When Coros releases a $500 watch with mapping, they're bringing a knife to a gunfight.
And the long-term existential threat for them is the Wear OS question. They don't have widespread payments or native Spotify, which people now just expect.
Logically, you'd think they'd have to adopt Google's Wear OS to survive. But here's the cruel twist. Google and Samsung have ring-fenced the latest, best versions of Wear OS for themselves. They've squeezed out third parties.
So the challengers are stuck.
They're stuck. They either have to stick with their own limited proprietary OS or use older, less capable versions of Wear OS. It's a tough spot.
Let's break down Coros. They've been pretty successful, especially in the adventure running world.
They have, but their newer, more expensive models are now competing head-to-head with Garmin, where the Coros ecosystem is just weaker. That's a dangerous place to be. We might see a new Coros Nomad adventure watch in 2026, maybe an Apex 4, Pace 4.
And they're looking at the 247 wearable band market, too.
They are, but the forecast notes a major hurdle for them is their app quality. It just lacks the polish to compete in the mass market wellness space against Whoop. Also, their DURA bike computer apparently isn't selling well, so the DUR 2 might get skipped entirely.
Suunto, though, is the one brand that's noted as most likely to surprise us.
What's fascinating with Suunto is the influence of their Chinese parent company, which also owns the Hailu brand. That gives them access to huge manufacturing efficiencies and distribution in Asia. They could potentially release newer, more affordable models that could really challenge the mid-range.
And the key advice for them is to stop playing the feature catch-up game.
Exactly. They should compete where Garmin is weaker, in things like design, usability, and app simplicity. Find a different battle to fight.
And finally, Polar. The source suggests their best hope for a new direction is the Polar LP, their 24/7 recovery tracker.
Polar desperately needs a complete overhaul. A new hardware platform is expected with the Vantage V4 in 2026, which is essential. But their software is holding them back so much they still don't have a basic running track mode, and their web platform and app feel really dated.
As for Wahoo, they're pretty quiet on new bike computers until 2027.
But the hopeful prediction is that they'll finally leverage the power meter tech they got from Speedplay and release Shimano and Look pedal variants. That would be a big move for their ecosystem.
So circling back to bike computers, Garmin is the undisputed leader. Wahoo and SRAM's Hammerhead are the only real challengers.
But here's a really crucial insight from the analysis. The Garmin Edge will not pull further ahead in market share or features. Their dominance is too high, and their tech is too advanced. It is now logarithmically easier for a challenger to catch up on features than it is for Garmin to invent something truly new and revolutionary.
So there's a ceiling on Garmin's dominance.
Exactly, and that creates an opportunity for the others to at least reach feature parity. For Hammerhead, though, the Karoo 4 is speculated for Q2 2026, but battery life is their Achilles heel. The Karoo 3 just about gets away with its battery life, and any new features can't come at the cost of endurance.
And then you've got the smaller players like Brighton, Sigma, and Magene.
They're the best of the rest. Good core hardware for the price, but they lack the ecosystem punch. They're fine for basics, but they fall apart when you try to integrate complex sensors or training platforms.
So let's zoom all the way out. What is the long-term end game for this whole industry?
The trajectory seems to be a standoff between three major forces: Apple's walled garden with watchOS, the Google-Samsung Wear OS alliance, and the sheer volume and budget dominance of the big Asian brands.
So where does that leave Garmin, Polar, and Suunto?
They'll still be here in 2030, but the size of their market is the question. As Apple and Google watches get better at sports and recovery, the need for a specialized device shrinks for the average fitness consumer.
And the Wear OS market is a duopoly now.
It is. Google and Samsung have deliberately ring-fenced it, starving those specialist challengers of the modern smart features they need to compete on a daily basis.
Meanwhile, the budget battle is heating up, driven by brands like Amazfit and Huawei.
The end game there is who can make the best do-it-all $150 commodity watch. This fierce budget competition is a huge potential disruptor to the value brands in the West, like Polar and even Coros. If you can get 80% of a Coros Pace's features for half the price, that's a problem for them.
So we've covered the tech maturity, the price pressures, Garmin's strategy of saturation and recycling, and the tough road ahead for the challengers. Bringing it all together, what does 2026 fundamentally mean for the listener?
I think 2026 is defined by one word: maturity. It's less about groundbreaking new tech leaps like satellite or the micro-LED gamble, and it's much more about consolidation, gap filling, and refinement. For you, the sports tech consumer, the most significant shifts this year are actually external. They're driven by those rising prices, manufacturing changes, and, most importantly, that pivotal EU legislation that could shake everything up.
And the key takeaway for you, the learner, is to recognize Garmin's core strategy in action. It is specifically designed to, quote, swamp market segments with numerous product options, perhaps deliberately trying to confuse customers into asking which Garmin, rather than which watch. They want to own every single niche.
And that leads perfectly to our final provocative thought for you to think about. We noted that Garmin's non-emergency location sharing is really restricted because it only works with their own messenger app. Now, given that the EU seems so focused on forcing Apple to open up its ring-fenced ecosystem, will this regulatory pressure eventually solve Garmin's biggest interoperability problems?
Could the EU's mandate allow Garmin to finally use Apple's native APIs for communication and location sharing?
And if it does, would that finally allow Garmin to compete with Apple and Google on a truly level playing field in the pure smartwatch space? Something for you to consider as you watch the political and the technical maneuvering unfold this year.